wasn't paying attention there. He sucked it down. Another fun little frogfish. Hey guys, Zach Draskovic here, coming at you with part 2 of my tournament series for Lake Guntersville and the post spawn. And today I want to be covering the brim spawn. Now, brim beds are a great place to target big bass this time of the year. If you are a tournament angler, running the brim bed pattern is a great way to put a limit in your boat. Not only can you catch a large number of bass on these brim beds, sometimes you can catch some big ones. Now, where do you start when fishing brim beds? Well, you can't fish brim beds if you can't find them. So where are you gonna look for these brim beds? I did a video on this earlier in the year. I'm gonna leave a link up above if I can figure it out. If you want a short of the video, basically what you're looking for is flatter, hard bottom areas. Really, you take what you would look for in finding spawning bass minus a foot of depth, and you'll find brim spawning in these areas. And these brim beds are easy to identify. They look like little round honeycomb patterns on the bottom, or a bunch of little light patches close together, and you'll see those brim doing circles. It's like looks just like a beehive. These brim beds are pretty easy to spot once you come up on them. If you're going to a good hard bottom area, you're going to want to fish any lighter colored spot before you get too close to make sure you don't spook the bass. Even though I'm talking about the brim spawn now, man, when I went out the other day catching these brim eaters, I saw more bass beds than I've seen all year that had fish on them. So keep that in mind if you're launching on Guntersville. Don't rule out spawning bass just yet. We have the shad spawn, the brim spawn, and the bass spawn still going on. So it's wide open right now. Let's get to how to catch these brim eaters. Now, I keep it really simple when I'm fishing brim beds. You don't need any complicated techniques or a whole lot of tools in your arsenal when fishing these brim eaters. My first weapon of choice when I'm fishing brim beds is just going to be a senko. This one I cut off my rod right here. Just a green pumpkin senko is going to do a lot of damage around brim beds. And a lot of people rig it wacky, and I was catching some the other day rigging it wacky style, but I really like just a Texas rig senko. I'm using a 4/0 lighter wire worm hook. This is a Ryugi 4/0 worm hook, and I like rigging it Texas rig versus the a wacky style. I feel you get a much better hookup ratio with these, and when you do have them hooked, you get more of those fish in the boat. Now, if you can only get them to bite on a wacky rig, you got to do what you got to do. If you have to use not a senko but just a regular worm rig, wacky rig, do what you have to do to get bit. But if you can get bit, the first thing that I would try when fishing these brim beds is going to be a Texas rig senko. Another one of my lures that I like to use if you want to throw a curveball at them. If you're not catching them on a wacky rig or your little senko, try one of these little yamat tanukis. They're a pretty cool bait. I've been throwing a lot in recent years, especially around these brim beds. Sometimes with the wacky worm or the senko, they'll just get the tail, and this little shorter profile of the yamat tanuki really makes it to where when they suck the bait in, they're getting the whole thing. So I have a really good hookup percentage with these. And if you're fishing a little bit deeper brim beds, these sink a little bit faster than a standard senko, so you can get down to them and be a lot more efficient covering water with these. And these are great bluegill imitators. They're short and squat, and they have good action to them. They almost work kind of like a subsurface fluke. They're more like a short fat fluke, I would say, than a senko. Just when you're using these, I don't use the same hook as with the senko. I'm using a EWG style hook, using a 4/0 EWG with one of these to make sure that with that little bit thicker profile that I have enough bite left over after they hit to sink a hook into their mouth. So that would be my other lure that I would try if I'm facing some stubborn bluegill eaters. When you're fishing it, make sure you overcast on these brim beds. Throw past the brim beds and work into some of those open areas, and then fish it just a little bit past them, because sometimes the bass will be sitting off of the beds just a little bit or just on the edge. So make sure that you get the back of the brim beds and just in front of the brim beds as well, to make sure that you're getting it in front of the fish. The next thing that I would say is make sure that you're getting it from a couple different angles, to make sure that you're getting it in front of the fish. Sometimes in these more easy to find beds, the fish may be used to seeing the worm coming one way, but if you get a different angle, bring it past a different way, sometimes that'll trigger a strike from a fish that wouldn't have hit otherwise. So hit you some different angles on these brim beds when tossing your worm at them. But if you can only throw one lure, a senko would definitely get you a limit in the boat this time of the year fishing these brim beds. Now, my second lure that I'm going to use and that I had the most success on the other day was a poppin' frog. This is my favorite lure to use this time of the year when fishing these brim beds, especially since we've had so much eelgrass over the years. A poppin' frog is very efficient, and typically these frog eaters are going to be larger caliber fish. And I'm going to fish the frog the same way as I was the senko. I'm making sure I'm casting past the target, not landing directly on the brim bed to where it could spook them. If floating eelgrass is a problem and making fishing with a senko or a wacky worm a little bit harder, that's when I'm going to use a poppin' frog first, and it's a very efficient way to cover these brim beds. Typically, you'll get a bite within the first cast or two if there's any around that are going to hit your poppin' frog. The poppin' frog works great. This shorter, wider presentation really imitates those bluegill, and that little poppin' sound that it makes really imitates the brim sucking stuff off the surface. This particular frog is my favorite, and I destroyed this thing today. I'm gonna see if I can fix it with some shoe goo. I caught so many fish on it. It was sinking for half the day was done. But this is my lucky frog, so I'm gonna see if I can fix it today. This frog in particular is my favorite one. This is the scum frog, poppin' frog, and I like these scum frogs because they are very soft. Having a very soft frog will increase your hookup percentage. If you have a different frog that you like, you can boil them and get them a little bit softer. But these scum frogs come naturally softer than any other frog that I've tried, and I really have a good hookup percentage with these scum frogs. So give them a try if you haven't before. If there's not a lot of grass around, throwing in a treble hook top water, like a spiral minnow here, some kind of prop bait or a little pop R can get you bit. Now, treble hook baits have taken a back seat for my brim bed fishing on Gunnersville in recent years because of the floating eelgrass. But if I'm in an area that eelgrass has been blown out of, I will throw a spiral minnow or a prop bait sometimes to try to trigger a reaction strike when that poppin' frog won't. But even when there's no grass around, that poppin' frog can do some serious damage. And will just because there's no grass around doesn't mean you can't use a frog. If they're slashing at your lure, that's when a treble hook bait will really come into play, when they're doing the slashing strikes and not eating things real good. I'm a big fan of 3-hook baits. All right, there's a couple more things you need to consider as a tournament angler when you're fishing these brim beds. You also need to consider the sheer number of brim beds that you need to find in order to run this pattern and to count on it on tournament day. If I was going to be targeting brim beds for a tournament, I would want to find at least 5 times more brim beds than I would need. Unlike some sneaky offshore spots, these brim beds tend to be relatively close to the bank, so a lot more people are gonna find these. Are a lot easier to find than some of those sneaky offshore fish. So you're gonna need to find a lot to dodge pressure. The second thing I would consider as a tournament angler, if I was gonna be running brim beds, is the weather. You need to make sure that you're looking ahead for what your weather is going to be like on tournament day. Because if there's a lot of thunder and lightning that's coming through on your tournament day or the day before, sometimes that can really mess up the shallow bite. If you have a stretch of foul weather the day before or on your tournament day, it can make the bass completely evacuate the shallows, and all those brim beds that you found can be completely vacated of bass. So make sure that you take a look at the weather before you rely on brim beds to win you your tournament. A little bit of rain is fine and can make the bite even better for a popping frog. But if you start having high winds, thunder, lightning, that can really drive these fish off of the brim beds. The bad weather can put you in a bad position if you are relying on these fish to get you a limit. Hope you enjoyed today's video and learned something about fishing during the brim spawn. Please like, subscribe, use these lures, fish these areas that I talked about today, and I'm confident you will load the boat.